NGO system, you have to be part of a club in order to participate or to be even aware of the decision making in that club or that forum. If you are not even aware, then you are a non-participant ab initio. So get involved, and then you have a chance of being aware and therefore of participating. Number two, those who are in hitting distance of the UN participate in the briefings on Thursdays, and in the other, they can sit in the committee rooms and watch the proceedings, and therefore organize themselves to advance their interests, whether their interests are in human rights or in disarmament or in security issues or in climate change issues or whatever. You have to be there in order to know what is happening, and that's the advantage. And so I would encourage everybody to organize himself and to get into the system, initially into the DPI NGO system, which is easier, and subsequently into the ECOSOC NGO system, which is slightly more difficult. But there's no doubt in my mind that accreditation is an important exercise. Question number two, sir, for you.
I like already the response by Ambassador Kamal. The figure you mentioned, about 1,500 NGOs, is quite small. There are more than 3,000 already accredited under the DPI system, and definitely over 1,000 or close to 2,000 accredited with UN ECOSOC. One also has to realize that there are other accreditation venues within the United Nations, meaning that there are many other NGOs who have been accredited to very specific conferences, but do not find the importance of a year-round accreditation, meaning to say that there are NGOs whose objectives may deal with sustainable agriculture, and therefore they will only want themselves to be accredited in a meeting by UNDP or the other UN agencies like Food and Agriculture Organization with respect to sustainable agriculture. So you see them now, after a while you don't. In other words, there are many other NGOs that are significantly involved every once in a while in a multilateral international decision-making process, and then they go back to in their numbers in the mountains of the Himalayas or in the lowlands of the Philippines, etc. And therefore, the non-governmental presence is not only to be found at the United Nations, but across the plains and the mountains of the world. On the number two question, there are a multiplicity of forms of presencing NGOs, not only at the United Nations, but other multilateral institutions. And I think not only must we be thinking of the accreditation process, we must also think of networks and alliances. In other words, there are NGOs that get accredited, and then their networks, which is a far bigger constituency, are not necessarily found at the United Nations. And therefore, I want to look at it as the twin of presence and representation. The advantage of being accredited is that you are able to presence a voice at the United Nations. You are able to present a warm body as a witness to good practices or bad practices, and therefore you witness not only to governments who sometimes do not want to hear the truth of their own citizen in a public and international fora, but also other governments who have heard otherwise, and finally they found a voice to characterize what indeed is happening on the ground, in terms of human rights, in terms of response to natural disasters, in terms of the status of women in those countries, quite different sometimes in official reports. That's why non-governmental organizations have, if not perfected, have become better at producing what is called shadow reports, so that they mimic the very chapters of the government's report, but they provide an alternative perspective. They provide data that counters what governments present in international settings.
On the question of networking, to which Mr. Bautista has referred, the leaders, Lehigh is one of the leaders, incidentally, in networking, and Professor Hunter particularly, because the whole concept of exchanging emails with a wide variety of people on matters of interest to the UN is something which is currently Professor Hunter himself is focusing on that. Fairleigh Dickinson University is focusing on that by trying to spearhead an association of all the accredited NGOs under a concept called academic impact, which is being worked out by Fairleigh Dickinson along with Lehigh in close collaboration with the United Nations. So this concept of networking, of using the internet as a force multiplier, is something that is critically important, and I'm delighted to see that Lehigh has not only asked the question, but also has been a leader in the exercise. Over to Montclair for 2 questions from that end.
How can civil society and NGOs get the representation and decision making that you argue that they need? You're telling us that they need this, but what would be a plan of action for civil society and NGOs to achieve this?
Good question. Question number 2, please.
Well, first of all, I want to say it's an honor to be asking a question today, and thank you very much for having us. What do you hope to accomplish after these various NGOs that you, what do you hope to accomplish with the help of these NGOs once you have already integrated them into your roster?
Thank you. Once again, let's split the questions into, I'll take the first one, you take the second one. So the question is, how do you implement, how do you get success? Now please understand that at the moment, civil society is completely excluded from the decision-making system of the United Nations. That decision-making system is in the hands of governments, and in the case of the Security Council, it is really in the hands of 5 governments only. And the question is, do you like that or not? You are not being consulted. You, the questioner, despite the fact that you are the citizen of a country, that you have brains, that you are in a class, that you think you have capacity to decide what is good and what is bad, you are not even being asked the question. And this is exactly what was happening 2000 years ago between the aristocrats and the slaves. The aristocrats were taking all the decisions. The slaves had no part in the elections, in the voting, in the decision making, etc. And the question was, do we as slaves accept that, or are we going to react? That is the question. If you want to accept the position of a slave and say, I'm happy my aristocrat is taking good care of me, he gives me food and shelter, and I don't want freedom, I don't want decision making, okay, then that's what you are. You are an earthworm today, and you will be an earthworm tomorrow. But if you want to react, then you have to take on the aristocracy frontally. And that is the history of the world. The history of democracy in the world is a frontal attack towards aristocracy. You used to have in Britain a a rule which said the divine right of kings to do no wrong. A king was divine. He could do what he liked. But then for 1,000 years, we have been attacking that concept and progressively bringing in the concept of democracy. But that concept is not complete yet. And the completion of that concept depends on you, not on me. I have a vested interest